Are there any practical ways L&D can better leverage business partners?
It's a delicate balance again because you sort of have to mitigate reinforced behaviors over time, right? What is a reinforced behavior? Well, reinforced behavior becomes a habit. On the business side, you got bad habits, which are, hey, we're working on this project. We've been working on this project for about 6 months. Man, we're excited. We're about to launch in 2 weeks. Yay. Then somebody goes, man, we're going to need some training. Yeah, you're right. Who does the training? Oh yeah, the L&D people. Oh, okay. Well, let's call them up. And so obviously that's the usual thing we always complain about, right? It's like, oh, they came to us and they want training. They're not even, they just want training, and it's got to be done next week or in 2 weeks. So we're not included in the conversation. We're not here and there. Well, that's the thing. You don't have a strong relationship. You don't have a network relationship with business leaders. That is crucial, right? To support even a learning culture to begin with.
Welcome to the LearnOps Leadership Series. Today, I'm very excited to have a friend and somebody who I've known for a while, Alexander Salas, to the show. Welcome, Alexander.
Hey, Ryan, how's it going?
Um,
Thank you for having me. And I've been watching the episodes, and it's really excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited about today's episode. It's a little bit different. You're an award-winning learning experience designer. You've worn many hats in L&D, from being a director of training systems to instructional designer. You've had ownership and supervised learning management systems. So you have a very unique background where you've been the hands-on operational person in the team in a lot of different roles, right? And throughout the years that we've known each other, you've always told me also about this one team that you worked in at a previous company, and you called it the Unicorn L&D team. So I'm really excited to jump into what does that mean, and how you had that level of success, and why it was differentiated from other companies you might have worked at too. So thank you
Oh,
for being
absolutely.
here.
No, no, yeah, yeah, absolutely. So yes, there was that one time that I worked at a major Fortune 20 company, and it just happened to be that team that I joined, that when I first joined them in the onboarding process, the biggest surprise was that they had everything documented. They had all the processes documented. The workflow was set up in on a central intranet, and also they not only had that, but it was a really well organized tech stack to run the operation smoothly. So, and I guess that was a great thing as well because it was a team of 30 plus people. So you're talking about few managers, 6 or 4 managers or something like that, and then you have about 20 or so instructional designers and learning experience designers. So yes, to me it was very rewarding because I had a pedigree of several organizations, and I actually helped many organizations start from scratch. Right, like we got nothing, we don't have an LMS, we don't have anything. What do we do? So yes, it was. That's the unicorn. That's one part of that.
Well, I'm excited to dig deeper into that for sure, because there's probably a lot of learnings for the audience, and people who are members of the L&D team who might not be at the VP or director level yet for their particular teams. We usually talk high level strategy, during these series, and today I'm excited to get more into the weeds to talk about how does the L&D team member feel? How do they address uncertainty, get buy-in, and build business cases with their manager team members, and pitch in to improve processes. But before we get into all of that, tell us a little bit about your story. How did you even get into learning and development? How did it all get started?
Many folks that follow, I've been listening to this one, but yeah, I'm a U.S. Navy veteran, so I can take you back to back in the day. Now I'm a U.S. Navy veteran, and in the Navy, You promote in two ways. You know, you there's two elements that are critical there, right? So one is passing an exam, which is like a sort of a qualification exam for the next rank, and also you you have to get your performance review, and it's not only that it has to be a good review, it has to be a specific type of qualification in their review. So there's a must promote and there is a early promote, right? An early promote means, hey, this person has been ready for the next rank, and it just adds, I mean, it really, if you had a good test score, that thing just puts you right in the money. Like you're right there, you're going to main rank. So I was good at taking tests. I was really good at taking tests because I got this beautiful dome here, you know, with I can communicate with dolphins, and so that's a nerdy joke for the Echo Sound folks. But yeah, I had this photographic memory thing. You know, I can remember texts. I can remember the actual text in the book as I was reading the answers.
Wow.
So I was really good at taking tests, and I also had all these techniques and strategies to learn. So you know, the usual stuff like flashcards, mnemonics, things like that. And so I began mentoring. Once I made the rank of what is equivalent to a sergeant, let's say, in the army, I began developing others. I began enabling others, and this, you know, like anybody else, I think is first of all that big commitment to serve others, right, to help others out, and the second piece of that is the aha moment. You know, that reward you get from seeing somebody else get it, and somebody else become, you know, improve their chances in life because of the help that you're providing. So as you know, I do that today, obviously with LXD launch, with the online academy as well, the online learning space. But I've also been doing that, you know, throughout my career in LinkedIn and everything else. I just happened to hit a big mark too, you know, 25,000 followers.
Oh, nice.
Plug.
Cool.
But yes, so the story started there, and that motivated me to find out. Right? Okay, so this is a job. Yeah, I can actually do this for a living.
Hmm.
This is amazing. And I pursued. You know, I did the normal thing that people does, which is like look things up. Back in the day, you know, back in those days, we're talking about '98. There was not a lot of it was 2004. Not a lot of internet going on. You know, you can say not as today anyway with social media. And so I found ATD, right, and that gave me some kind of guidance. And then obviously the thing about getting a degree, let's go get a degree. So I went through that route, and I started working. My first job was actually traveling to Latin American countries as a facilitator. So a lot of people don't know this part. I started as a facilitator and a trainer. And I usually kid around because you know the first thing I did was be a PowerPoint assassin. You know, so but it's been a long time since then, and that evolved into working in instructional design and everything else. So I work for several Fortune 100 companies. I've been an instructional designer, a learning experience designer, and also have been in a role of leadership, supporting the full life cycle of learning and development.
Very fascinating. And I know that you do a lot of podcasts and interviews, and you definitely
Oh
keep
yeah,
up with best practice technologies. You've been keeping up with our technology. Thank you for that. And
yeah, yeah.
what would you say are some of the biggest changes you've noticed within the industry? Um, let's say in the last 2 years, particularly, because I've personally seen a lot of change in L&D around the time from COVID until now, right? I mean, I, team different L&D teams that we
Yes.
talk to are just operating differently. What have you seen?
Yes. So they are good things. You know, they're great. I think everything's great, and there's some great, good things in there. It's also to note, you know, I think it's valid for us to note that it's forced change, right? And although it is forced, I'll take it because it's change. It happens, so it's great. I think if the pandemic wouldn't happen, we would have been the same situation that you know we've been since then. But one thing that you notice, obviously, is that virtual instructor-led training became, you know, came to the forefront, and e-learning as well, obviously, came up to the forefront. So the digital solutions came to the forefront, not only in corporate learning, but also it hit the school systems and it hit colleges and it hit ed tech. So ed tech is booming right now. So yes, the changes are those, and I think with that opportunity, I think companies have and leadership have a great opportunity, right, to really fortify their tech stack, their learning technology tech stack. And that's, traditionally people do LMSs, right, and the LMS content management and stuff like that. And then we have the emergence of, which has been happening for the next 9 years, right? Learning record stores, XAPI, a lot more capability in analytics there.
Yeah.
So some elite organizations are doing this. And at the same time, the one thing that is always, I think, a little bit doesn't get enough attention and is it's a little bit of oversight is the workflow, right? So the workflow of the actual L&D team, the operational workflow of the L&D team, supporting that life cycle is. I mean, I got to tell you that I'm sad to report today. There's still people running on spreadsheets, right?
Yeah.
And that may be just a thing of habit, but it's great to have a centralized unit or a centralized platform in which you can have visibility to the operational workload that your teams have, the individuals, and also the relationships, and tracking what's happening, what is actually learning and development doing, because I think in the end that supports the overall case to have that seat at the table, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, I noticed that we had that shift, and with that shift, we had such a emphasis on formalizing those platforms.
Yeah.
So VIOT, e-learning, and how to work better.
That makes a lot of sense. It's interesting because up until maybe Q2 of last year, we heard a lot of people being on spreadsheets, working with doing email for intake, PDFs or forms, etc.
Hmm.
And we've seen this shift, and I think it's because of digital transformation from COVID, where more and more companies bought into corporate wide project management tools, Smart Sheets, Asana, Monday.com, whatever. So we've started to see L&D teams adopt more of these generic project management tools, but it doesn't cover all of their unique processes. So they still are
Right.
stuck with manual processes in some areas, and so that there's movement there. It's getting a little bit better, but it's still a lot less efficient than how other functions, more mature functions like product management or engineering or marketing teams are working or operating today in the business world. So it's
It's true. It's true.
yeah,
And just to tap into that, we're talking about the unicorn team, right?
yeah.
So one of the greatest things about that unicorn team is they had their own customized solution they developed, right?
Hmm.
And it was great because it did. I mean, it tracked the whole process. So if anybody's listening out there and you're an instructional designer or you're into this, you know, you probably heard about ADDIE. So supporting the whole ADDIE aspect of things, right? Capturing the analysis, doing the design, documentation, right? What are we doing? Where are we doing it? Who is the target audience? All those things. And then the development of it, iterations, the implementation into the integration of the different stakeholders that you're going to need for that, like IT, which is always overlooked, right? Having that partnership with IT, you're going to roll out a new technology, you're going to roll out a new something into that environment. Well, IT should be a part of that conversation every time, and obviously the evaluation. So the the interesting thing is that customized solution, amazing stuff, and I never seen anything like that in 12 years of experience, and it was great. The only caveat to that I think it was probably one of the weaknesses, right? Because custom solutions are great. The thing about custom solutions is sustainability.
Hmm.
So if you got two people coding the stuff for you, what happens when those two people leave the organization? That's the only thing I saw there to be sort of like, okay, what if. But yeah, I mean, I think it's better to have that than not to have anything, right? Or be
For
stuck in
sure.
spreadsheets, right? So, I know we're not talking about products and things, but I mean, obviously, when you think when we met because I saw I got a glimpse of Synapse and at the time, and I was like, oh, this is interesting. This is not it with a generic project management tool. Yeah, you can manage projects, but a lot of people don't really know full project management, and sometimes it's a little bit of a nuclear choice,
Yeah.
for projects that are not that involved. So I really appreciated that, and I think it's a great thing of how the product has evolved and have been able to manage, the operational ability, right? The operational agility. I think every team in L&D should have that, and I think if anybody's trying to get a job with a specific team, or I always ask the question now, like, how do you work? How do you please explain to me how does this work from the beginning? When
Yeah.
somebody comes and asks you, we need training, what happens? Take me to that journey, right?
Yeah, I think that's really important advice to people too, so that they know what they're walking into, right? And they also can test the culture of the organization and their perspective on learning and development. I mean, it's no doubt that learning and development, especially throughout COVID, the it the value to the business and the impact L&D has on the business has become more familiar, right? To C-suite even. Um, Companies relied on L&D when overnight the entire workforce had to work from home. Who taught them how to work from home? L&D, right? Who taught them
No.
how to stay safe during COVID? L&D. When we have some customers um, who are in heavy regulated um, industries, pharmaceutical companies or actual pharmacies, for example, and state by state there was different rules, and they had to train these people how to work um, in these new working ways, right? And so I think people woke up to the value and the outcomes L&D can have back on the business. But in your perspective, Alex, like where do you see what role do the operations of an L&D department play in supporting business strategy or performance?
The difference there is what is the L&D unit capable of doing. I think the best L&D function out there, or the best L&D operation, is synonymous with the business operation. It can be separated from it, and that's where we just have to be careful in what we're doing. If you're a leader in learning and development, you can have your head stuck in education, because education is now, unless your business, if your business is about education, if you're supporting an educational business, then okay, that could be the thing. But the emphasis should be more into the efficiency, right? Into the tasks involved, into the strategy that the business is going after, and supporting that strategy. A little bit of, sprinkle a little bit of learning science, of course, sprinkle a little bit of business minded approaches, and having performance support up front. In other words, having the business support pieces up front, and think always that that is an element that either needs to be checked upon or developed upon on any type of intervention. And then you can choose whether a course is part of that, or whether an educational piece is part of that. But many times we're starting with education, and we end up with education results. And we all know what that is, right? I mean,
Uh-huh.
you get a diploma, you get a degree, but that doesn't mean that you're doing better or the team is actually performing anything. And those are critical components. So when it comes to the organization of the team, same situation. You can't be afraid of technology. You a piece of paper is technology. That's what I tell people all the time, right? And a lot of people are very comfortable with that. So the reason why there seems to be this fear about technology, or this where people prefer to hire three more humans and to rather than operationalize or maximize their efficiency with technology. So I mean, in the end, that's great because you're obviously you're helping people, but we also have to keep that balance where we're helping the business, the organization,
Mhm.
and you can't wonder why you're not having a seat at the table if you're not in that mindset.
No, I think what you said is really important about interventions and to understand where L&D can intervene and support the business. It's first about getting to know the business, learn about the what is the 1 to 3. In some companies, they do 5 year planning, right? So what is the strategy for the business for that 1, 3, 5 year plan? Where does learning and development play a part? But then also talking to those functional leaders, what problems are they having that are preventing them from business objectives, learning objectives? Are there scenarios that come up like COVID out of nowhere, you know, that are impacting the business? I mean, even looking to the east right now, which is really unfortunate. You know, um, a lot of companies being remote work first
Of
now.
course,
They have people in these areas, and the companies and people
of
are being
course,
impacted, right? So
of course.
So how do you partner with the business so that you as an L&D team can be a consultant to getting the business to where it needs to by intervening with learning solutions? In your opinion, Alex, like talking about these being a partner to the business and collaborating, how important do you think that is for L&D? And you've done this a lot. Are there any practical ways L&D can better leverage business partners?
Oh yes, and I think it's a matter of it's a delicate balance again because you sort of have to mitigate reinforced behaviors over time, right? So what is a reinforced behavior? Well, reinforced behavior becomes a habit. So on the business side, you got bad habits, which are, hey, we're working on this project. We've been working on this project for about 6 months. Man, we're excited. We're about to launch in 2 weeks. Yay. Then somebody goes, man, we're going to need some training. Yeah, you're right. Who does the training? Oh yeah, the L&D people. Oh, okay. Well, let's call them up. And so obviously that's the usual the usual thing we always complain about, right? It's like, oh, they came to us and they want training. They're not even, they just want training, and it's got to be done next week or in 2 weeks. So we're not included in the conversation. We're not here and there. Well, that's the thing. You don't have a strong relationship. You don't have a network relationship with business leaders. And that is crucial, right? To support even a learning culture to begin with. So to see that value, to increase your value and augment your value, augment your visibility as well throughout the organization, there should be that effort of partnership. So from the leadership and down. And that boils down to many different actions and behaviors. So often, let's start from the bottom up, right? So let's say instructional designers. Often, instructional designers have the whole, we against them with the SMEs, with the subject matter experts, and that should not be the case. Subject matter experts are people, and they have jobs. They got stuff to do. So it shouldn't be a case where we're going to ask the SMEs to stop what they're doing so they can come help you, give you a few tips about objectives or what's important and what's not. You should be the one supporting and service that. So you got to look at that balance, right? And then if we scale up from the leadership perspective, same thing. Like I was mentioning before, you're doing projects that involve technology, involve things in an environment controlled by IT. Well, you should be hanging out with IT. You should get a lunch with IT manager, administrator, get to know what their pain points are, what their problems are. You should educate yourself to talk a little bit on how they talk so you can actually make that connection. And they're people too. And that's the way you gain good networking relationships with people. After that, you you can, that value becomes, pervasive, and that then becomes a thing like, man, those people are good to go. They're great. They're business minded. They're with us. They're part of the team, and then that will definitely eventually work towards L&D having a better outlook.
No, well said. To your point about SMEs and meeting with the C-suite too. I think for L&D, looking at time as a currency, and everybody's busy. Everybody has a job to do. Everybody's busy. It doesn't matter what role you're in the organization. Just respecting people's time, and if you're asking for time, um, really prioritizing, right? If you're asking somebody for time, let them know why you're asking for the time, why it's a priority, and let them feel, hey, by you investing time here, we can help all these people. These are the groups of people we're going to help. This is the impact we're going to have on the business together. They're going to find time if they're aligned to that mission. And usually with subject matter experts, if you're asking them for their subject matter expertise to design a solution and be a part of that solution design, um, most likely the audience who's going to benefit from that are actually an audience that the subject matter expert cares about. Health and safety, for example, right? If there was a problem at a plant and there was a health and safety incident, and this person has the expertise to help protect and save lives by being part of a learning solution design that can train 1,000 employees on staying safe, that person's going to prioritize it if they know what it's about, right? So, yeah, I think L&D can tell stories better to get buy-in too, and be genuine as people, as you mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, you're building. I think it's just, we don't even have to talk about it. That's just general good business acumen,
Yeah.
even from an individual perspective, right? If you get stuck in being a silo minded person, then that will create issues with that, where because you won't be really networking and you won't gain that visibility within the organization. So in the same thing, L&D just needs to think in those parameters, and think creatively about that, right? Outside
Mhm.
of the box of, I'm L&D, you need to give me what I want type thing. It's more like, I'm with you. Let's work on some stuff together, because we have to face reality. L&D is a support function, right? It's not a leading function. You're not leading anything. You're part of a business. And so you're supporting that. And you can lead, of course, but to get there, you have to show that you have value and support, because we know that when things get rough, when budgets get cut, the first ones to go are going to be support units, and L&D is one of them. So how do you prevent that? How do you appease that? Well, you can't necessarily block it all, right? But having champions on your side helps a lot.
Uh-huh.
So if they're about to say, hey, so what function should we go? And you got a lot of people that are behind you network wise, because you establish those relationships, then there's less chances, yeah, you may get hurt, but instead of being 20 people, there'll be just maybe 5 or 6. So,
Uh-huh.
yep.
And also, I think L&D tracking the process, right? So let's take an example. If you're working on a priority that was part of a 3-year strategic initiative, well, if you can track how much time, people's time went into designing that solution, um, track how it got delivered and to who, and the change that it drove in the business, and build like a mini business case out of that. Think of all of these projects that L&D supports. If they can have these micro business cases for each of those, it's easier to show the impact you had on the business. You just have to track it properly to be able to tell the story with the data. And I know that's hard, right? So let's talk about that. I mean, this unicorn team, right? Again, you've been around the block with different L&D teams, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of different operational challenges. You mentioned came into this company, had their processes documented, they had systems in place. Um, Being an instructional designer and being a member of the team, let's kind of tap into the emotional side. You know, you've been part of a team, this unicorn team where you had all these great things in place, and you've been part of other teams where you know, maybe they had Excel or something else in place. Like, what type of pressure does that do to you as an instructional designer? Like, what advice would you have to learning and development managers, learning development directors from a, a contributor perspective? Like, what was the difference from this unicorn team to other teams who weren't set up as efficiently?
Yeah, I think the biggest impact there, Ryan, is that there is a contrast of, and I always call this like, not to say that it's like one night, like like dating and stuff, but that whole process of interviewing and getting a job, right? The organization or the team you're interviewing with is putting their best foot up front, right? Everybody looks great. Everybody's very happy and cordial and stuff like that. And the same thing when as you as a interviewee, right? Obviously, you're not gonna be giving disclaimers about the weak parts of you, and oh yeah, I'm not really organized, but
Hmm.
you're just gonna be, oh yeah, I love project management and I do this and I do that. So that's all great and that happens and you get this impression. I think that's the biggest thing, right? We all get impressions when we meet people. Even before we meet people, we get impressions of who the person is and what they're about, what they believe. So you interview with a team, L&D team, you get a great impression from them. They seem to know their stuff, but perhaps you never touched that question about how do you work, how do you support your life cycle of projects. And then you're hired and you're so happy and you're so enthused about it, and it's great. Everybody knows that feeling because it's like winning, right? It's like hitting the big sale. You did the hard work, you put in the time, and it worked out, it panned out. But then you join in the organization first day, and yes, you get this onboarding experience, which is all great. Maybe you get some swag. Ooh, nice socks. Awesome. Yeah, right. Badges and whatever. And then, a week later, you start finding out that, well, because the first week, bro, you're going to have to do 25 courses of compliance and I don't know, all the little prerequisites. But then you start getting to the meat potatoes of actual working, like the actual work with the team. And then you start figuring out that there's no structure or there's no efficiency to it. And we go back to the spreadsheets and Google Drives. And not only Google Drives, but Google Drives that are like organized by perhaps people that don't really know organizational data. So it's all like, how it is. People create folders left and right, and and it's a folder within a folder within a folder. So obviously that creates this gap, this impression gap, this sense of worth that you are having, which for some people may be important. I mean, for me, it's super important. So that's why I mentioned that team to be the unicorn team, because I think in a systemic way, right? So it's not just saying, oh, this is what we just make courses, we're good. It's that piece of, okay, well, because we don't have this documented, because we don't have our our workflow flow process. Sorry, the workflow process really mapped out, and it's not common between us. Then there are deficiencies, and that those deficiencies continue to trickle and augment into the capability of the team, right? And so I think that's the most important part of it, and that it affects. But I mean, if you're a person that just says, "Hey, I'm happy making widgets. I don't need to know anything. Just tell me what to put the file, and I'm good. I just work for the weekend." Then obviously that doesn't bother you. That's not going to be an issue.
Mhm.
Instructional designers can feel a lot of pressure because then you have managers that will tend to micromanage because they don't have the visibility, right, on the teams. And that's the thing. So, how can you make sure that you're not doing that, because that's the easiest route to have people leave the organization. When you have to then start creating all these extra processes that don't get really documented, because now it's a manager that wants to ensure that they are good, right? It's a leader that's looking for themselves. So it's like, I want to
Hmm.
make sure that when my boss asks me about status and what's going on, I have an answer. So I'm going to ask now every single member of my in my responsibility, my direct reports. I'm going to ask them to an extra step now. They're going to fill out a form, a spreadsheet, not even a form. They're going to fill out a spreadsheet and send it to me, or we're going to put it in this drive. They're going to update it every week to let me know what they're working on. That to
Yeah, it
me,
kind of feels like, you're punching the card going into that warehouse job from back in the
exactly.
day.
Yeah, it's office space, right?
I believe it or not,
TPS reports.
I
Yeah.
worked at a company, what my first job, like in high school, where I had to do that. I remember it.
Uh huh. Yeah. So it's like, Office Space for one of the best movies ever made because it's so real. So like the TPS
Yeah.
reports, and oh yeah, you didn't do this on this. You didn't get the formatting right on that one. So yeah, it's some things that then become irrelevant and don't really have add a lot of value. And you got to think the instructional designers in general, they don't usually work in teams. That's another one, right? That's another one that's not good. Not a. That's what L&D needs to go next, and not many people do that.
Hmm.
And the great thing about this unicorn team is that they allow me to do that. Right? They allow me to set up a research and development team, right? Like a think about it, like an R&D team for L&D. It's
It's
basically
cool.
like a collateral duty where four people start getting creative and going, hey, what technology are we not using today, or what approach are we not using today, and let's try to do something with it and see how that if that can be a viable solution, which is basically what R&D or your R&D teams do in general for other industries, for product development, for things like that. So yes, I mean the leadership was great. They had the right systems in place. They created their own custom solutions when there were no solutions, and that's what it takes. That's what it takes. But that's not the reality for the rest of the industry, and I will probably say probably 80% if we go by the Pareto law.
Hmm.
So like 20% of the efforts gets you 80% of the results. So I think 80% of the industry is not there yet. It's not working
Yeah.
with learning record stores. It's not working with operational systems like Synapse or anything like that that give them visibility into what's happening, who's doing what, and how to track it and manage it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, and the ones who are trying, a lot of them fall to the trap just because of budget. Like, what can I get from IT for free? And then you end up with a messy technology stack,
Yeah.
where it feels like you're working more efficiently, because you're not using the spreadsheet. But what you end up doing is creating these data silos where it makes it very hard to get to a place of dashboard. So if that stakeholder or C-suite asks you, "Hey, what did we do here?" It's very hard to kind of do that, to your point too. So I and the data, I think the actual number is 72%. We did something with Brandon Hall.
72%? Okay.
Yeah.
Hey. I
So
think you have better
making
insights than I do
progress.
on that.
So,
Yeah.
what outside of just disparate tools, and I know that the industry is learning how to work smarter, not harder. Why do you think L&D is struggling to gather data to either demonstrate or articulate the impact of how they're spending budget or time in learning investments? Like, what data and insights do you think they should be focused on? You talk about LXP, for example, that's more
That's a good
tracking
one.
experiences, right? So, how do you
Hmm.
combine delivery analytics and operational analytics or performance analytics? Like, what do you think? the right data sets are being part of this unicorn team. Like what type of data was being collected to ultimately show efficiency, effectiveness, and ROI.
When it comes to business, there's two major things you want to look at, right? And that's time and money. Yeah. So time and money. So how long is it taking to do this? How can we make it faster with the same quality, right? And how much money are we doing? So if it's going to cost more, it needs to produce some very results. But most likely, we're going to look to do things with less money and better times, and not sacrificing obviously the triad, which is quality, right? And it's all in context, of course. But you have to collect data from several points. That's the main thing. And also, I think the framework in play may be a bigger impact too. So again, a lot of practices in L&D is still stuck in education, like Kirkpatrick's model as a educational evaluation methodology, right? You don't often hear things like Stufflebeam's CIPP, right? Context, input, process, and problem, or problem process, whichever we figure out in order. But that's a programmatic evaluation. And often I wonder if we are doing that. We're evaluating our life cycle, right? Our program. So, what project was given to what instructional designer? How long did it take? And how many resources were they used? And what was the cost of the project? Those things, right? Figuring those things out. Was this the right approach in design? Was this the right methodology? Was this the right delivery methodology? All those different plans. So if you end up with, there are fail approaches out there like learning styles, for example, right? Because then that makes you create resources that perhaps are not needed for the specific task. And what that means is, well, if you want to learn how to drive a bike, you first of all need to start with a very defined goal. You can drive a bike as a Tour de France cyclist, or you can drive a bike as just hanging around the corner, right, and having fun. Or you can be a BMX rider. Those are three different set of requirements and different capabilities. So you got to start with that clear aim. And once you have that clear aim, then how are you tracking the performance of that? And in combination, then what impact is that having to your operation? So how many instructional designers do you need? How many resources do you need? What technologies are used? Kind of like stuff I hit on before. But the interesting pieces then is what data are you collecting then for the impact in the organization? And I think that we are better suited to kind of look at things like Six Sigma, or look at things like Lean in that respect to address some of the situations. But from an analytics perspective, we are going to be more capable using a technology stack than just relying on all methodologies of I'm going to send a survey out and gather that survey, or I'm going to ask people if they like it or they don't like it. That really doesn't give you a lot of insight, right? Because that's a lot of subjective stuff that doesn't get in play. So instead of, even if you were, let's say, still using Kirkpatrick's or something like that, your level one should not be about liking it or not liking it, or are you going to use it type thing, because people don't know. Who knows?
Mhm.
They could tell you, yeah, I'm going to use it. Uh-huh. And then how do you know that it was really used? The only way you can get this is by ratifying that information with the work people, right? With their supervisors, with the tracking data, if there's tracking data to provide. So obviously it's all in context, but that's the key component. So if you're looking at the level one can be more useful as an evaluation if you're asking about the actual development of things, what you did, what impact did that have? What are your thoughts on that, right? Was the way that this video was developed helpful for this, helpful for that? Is it relevant to the task? Those things are more important than asking if you like it or you don't like it. So data points, you have to establish data points that we mentioned, cost and operation, time, money for the team, and also then in the business side, what you did, why do you do it, how does it work? And
Mhm.
unfortunately, we're not, a lot of people don't go there. And they don't go there for two reasons. Either they don't know how to go there, or they don't really want to go there because then it may bring out some operational flaws.
I think that's a good point, and I think you answered some of the last questions I had too. Do you think technology is the answer to these challenges, which you mentioned? And I think the response you just gave can help address the other question, which was what type of learning operational data can L&D leverage to prove their cases or business case to get resources or to grow their team to the C-suite, right? So, this really helpful, Alex. What advice would you have to an instructional designer who might not be as fortunate to be on that unicorn team quite yet, but they have aspirations of wanting the team to work more efficiently, you know working smarter, not harder? where what are what are some ways for them to talk to their team members or resources that you know where they can start to make these improvements?
Yes, I think primarily in their practice, they should be not only human centered, but systemic. So that's the first thing, right? And sometimes we wonder what that is. So the reality is, that, we have a lot of nebulous thoughts or a lot of dilution in the industry in terms of methodologies that came around that fix the problem. So, little anecdote that I put out in a video out there before on my YouTube channel. During World War II, right? We were using traditional methodologies of training. So at that time, it was just curriculum development, meaning we develop classes, we make content material classes, manuals, things like that. The problem with this is that the need that we had was could not wait for us to do this 6 months of training or 3 months of training or anything like that. We needed to do things quick. And don't quote me on the dates for training operations, but what you can quote me on is that we have ratified history in which German officers, declare that wow, the one thing that was amazing about these folks is that they train people from zero to dangerous. you know, Not exact quote. I can
Hmm.
imagine a German officer talking like that. But well, really surprised. Yeah, zero to dangerous. but but yes, we had this agility that we created because incidentally, and it wasn't really on purpose, somebody had the idea of using the film, using the historic film that was being recorded as a side project by film directors. So we actually had movie directors at that time capturing the action in Hawaii and other things. So that footage was used as basically military intelligence information. And quickly, people knew, the people that were training to be pilots or anything like that, they knew exactly where the target, where the areas were, the weak areas, the target areas, the locations, the military targets, all of that quickly transferred, and we were effective that way. So traditional instructional design wasn't going to do it. And that kind of triggered the whole systemic approach to training in the 60s. And in the 70s, we get ADDIE, well, the real ADDIE, not the ADDIE that people talk about blindly, right? We're talking about a real ADDIE that comes from an engineering process and addresses the systemic approach to things, meaning that whatever you do in the front affects the end, and whatever you do in the end is a result of what you did in the front. So you can sidestep analysis, right? Because if you don't, if you do that, then it doesn't matter. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know where you're going. And if you don't do those things, the only answer you have of what you're doing is the what. I made a course, I created a great program, I made a great program, and then you measure the wrong things. So you're measuring, oh, satisfaction. People loved it. NPS scores, right? You can use NPS scores, but it should not be the only thing you use.
Yeah.
So when it comes to learning anyway and performance, that's about it. So that's the critical thesis. I mean, instructional designer needs to have a good balance of systemic and human centered design. To help their team, systemic thinking is so important because you can then see the connections, the patterns. What we're doing makes a difference or has a trickle effect down or up the line. And what the business is doing can also have that effect on your team.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, being systematic. I mean, a lot of people also have this notion that we need to move away from Eddie, and you can. It's just a framework. You can do whatever you want, but there's no reason why you have to. It's how you process it. You don't need to do Addy in a waterfall, old school way. You can make Addy agile by
Well, yeah.
iterating throughout the process, right?
I
So,
mean,
so it
I wrote an article on that in the on my LinkedIn profile. It's been iterative for the military. The military, first of all, it's the first customer. It's the reason why it was made for. And in the 90s, it was modified to be iterative. But what you're mentioning is true, and it's the bandwagon effect. It's what they call the bandwagon effect. So that means that, something new comes along, everybody gets behind it, and then after a while, then someone starts criticizing it, and then it gets taken down. And so the thing with that is, people always talk about the shiny toy. What's the new thing? What's the thing that every year is something new? And that's because we don't implement things the appropriate way. We don't modify them or customize them to the needs of the organization, right? And and then it doesn't work. So if it doesn't work, then you try something else. You do something else, and you move on. But you're not moving on because the thing is not effective. You're moving on because you didn't do it right, or you didn't really know how to do it right.
Mhm.
So that's just, that's not a good logic, right? Because it's like trying to lose weight by eating donuts. Oh, I ate donuts. I'm not losing weight. I ate donuts. I'm not losing weight, right? So, well, yeah, you're not
so
gonna lose weight by eating donuts.
if you could leave one piece of feedback for that team who's trying to become more operationally efficient and get to that unicorn status, what are the
Yeah,
the three, like real quick, the top three things that they should think
yeah.
about?
So top three things. I mean, I'm gonna quote. I think it was I think Einstein's has some great quotes about this that really help out, right? So
Okay.
don't do don't do the what is it? Don't repeat the same behavior and expect different results. First of all,
Yeah.
that's one quote. I
I
think
think
the other
that's the
quote,
definition of insanity, right?
yeah,
If
definition of insanity, right? And then
Yeah.
the other quote is that I really love too is if you can explain something in 5 minutes, then you don't really understand it. So how do you get to explain the workflow in your team? Well, it has to be documented. It has to be practiced, right? And it has to be rehearsed. It has to be an integral part of how the way you work.
Hmm.
And if you don't do those things, then you won't really know, and really you won't really be a team. You just be a group of professionals doing stuff. So three things is to have a workflow that is well communicated throughout the team and is followed and is upheld, and then centralize and increase visibility to your practices. Don't work in a silo, right?
Hmm.
And centralize the stuff. Don't be like, well, I got my folder here, and then Bob has the folder over there, and Sissy has the other folder over there. No, it should be like a central place. Have a central place where everyone can see what's happening. That way, if someone gets sick, someone quits, someone doesn't annotate or document something, you can see where not only your projects are, where every other project is at.
Like a
And
work
that's
hub.
helpful. because that helps in sustainability.
And if
So
I could
recap,
add
because I think
one,
I've had a lot of stuff there.
yeah, I mean, no, that's good. And I think if we were to add one more, something that I think it's not just L&D, just business in general. Be more outcome driven. So,
Of course.
if you want to have a seat at C-suite, or you want to measure business impact, what is the business impact you're trying to measure? you know Go back to the consultation from that business stakeholder, or the analysis. What was the problem we're trying to solve? So here's the problem, so we're trying to achieve. And then if you're on the right team, it's going to be filled with smart people. How do you get together to get to that outcome, right?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's essential. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Alexander, this was great. I loved having you on the series, and really appreciate your time and you sharing your story with us. And we hope that everybody continues to learn from these series as well, so that we can get the industry to all becoming unicorns one day.
Yeah,
Thanks,
I mean that'd be
Alex.
great. That'd be great. It's a really honor that you give me the opportunity here. I know I've seen some very notable names come around as well, and yeah, doing a great job getting this message out. And you don't have to, and that's the great thing, right? That's what I appreciate in people. It's like you're providing a service, so keep doing it.
Thanks for watching the LearnOps Leadership Series. For more episodes like this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And visit us at cognota.com. That's COGNOTA.com.